So we talk a lot about productivity systems on this channel, but what happens when the system completely falls apart? What happens when you get a rejection, a setback, or you're just so emotionally exhausted that you can't even bring yourself to look at your to-do list? Now, following through with your plans isn't just about time management. It is deeply tied to your self-belief and your identity. So today I'm going to share a very recent raw story of how I lost my momentum and how I rebuilt my self-trust and actually got back on track. Now, when life throws you off track, you need a safe place to land and reset. This is exactly why I created my 7-step weekly reset blueprint. It is the exact tool I use to pull myself back up every single week. You can download it for free using the link in the description box below or the comment section, or you can simply comment weekly reset and I'm going to send it to you. If you're managing a demanding career, a side hustle, in trying to protect your peace through it all, make sure you hit that subscribe button and then let's get it. So recently I was interviewing for a remote position. I made it all the way to the final stage and I was really confident about the process, right? I was really confident that I was going to get the job. I knew I crushed the interview. I was highly, way qualified for the job. And even though the pay was below what I was looking for, I was okay with getting this job simply because it was a remote position, right? I was fine with the pay cut because it was a remote role. And then, unfortunately, I got the rejection email. I know a lot of us must have gone through this, but regardless of how many times you've gone through this, it's always painful and frustrating and heartbreaking. I mean, it's just the worst, right? So yes, I was completely bummed out and it did mess with my self-esteem. And I'm gonna be completely honest with you, it 100% derailed my entire week. I immersed myself into fiction books just to escape pretty much all week. The whole week was just gone. Maybe not gone, but I failed at trying to watch TV. I barely ate because I was just immersed into all the books that I was reading. And I didn't even work out once. Like the whole week, I didn't work out. Usually I work out 3 to 4 times a week. But this particular week, I did not work out at all. And I hadn't felt this demoralized or depressed in a really long time, right? And even when I got laid off last year, I wasn't really demoralized at all. But this particular situation, I think I was really banking on actually getting this position or getting this job. But it really bumped me out, like it knocked me out in a way that I haven't really felt or experienced in a long time. But over the weekend, something happened. I talked to my family, I went to church, and I was reminded of who I am. I had some time to listen to some messages and pray, and I took some time to walk and just reflect to kind of remind myself of who I am, remind myself that this doesn't really define me. This situation, this period or the season in my life, what is happening does not define who I am. And thankfully, I was able to knock off the dust and get back to my life. And I want to show you the practical and spiritual steps I took to do that. And by the way, learning how to bounce back from weeks like that without the guilt is a core focus of my 7-step weekly reset blueprint. If you ever have weeks where you just completely shut down, ensure that you grab the guide or simply just comment weekly reset and I'm going to send it to you. Now, the very first thing that helped is anchoring my identity and habits. So let's talk about the identity trap, right? When you are an ambitious, driven, hardworking individual, it is incredibly easy to tie your identity or your self-worth, your self-esteem to your output, to your title, to your job, or your paycheck, right? Now, when I got that rejection email, my brain immediately tried to tell me that I wasn't good enough. Now, the very first step to bouncing back, which I call the spiritual anchor, is actively detaching your identity from your circumstance. Getting a rejection, getting laid off, or having your side hustle launch not go the way you wanted it to, that doesn't change your inherent value, right? Now, I have to consciously always pretty much every day remind myself that my identity is firmly rooted in who God says I am, not what some other person thinks of me, not even what I think of myself sometimes, but my identity is inherently based on who God says I am. Now, that foundation is solid rock. It does not shift, it does not change depending on what is happening in your life, depending on your season. It's there. Like who God sees you are, it's standard, it's firm, it doesn't change. So regardless of whether some hiring manager somewhere said no, or you had an unproductive week or Tuesday, right? That doesn't change who you are. That doesn't change the way God sees you. So that is something that I have to remind myself of every single day. And that is something that I had to go back to consciously actively go back to remind myself of that particular truth that is firm and that will never ever change. But let me be completely honest with you, right? It is not always easy to see that truth when you are hurting or when there is basically circumstances and situations that are not ideal. And this is where you really fighting that mental battle comes in, right? The way I do that is when my mind wants to spiral into destructive and negative thoughts, I don't just passively sit there, right? I fight back. It's a mental warfare, basically. And that is what our minds are. There is always this internal battle between what is, like, physically the circumstances that you go through and what you actually want it to be. Regardless of that, you superimposing that identity of who you are regardless of the situation. So fighting back during these periods is normal. Is what happens in our mind. That's the internal battle that we go through. So what I do is listen to uplifting messages and sermons every single day. Sometimes I just leave it on consistently, depending on what is happening, depending on that mental battle that's going on in my mind. I just have it in the background on. So even if I'm not actively listening to it, but subconsciously I am listening. I'm listening to what I know is true of me based on what God says of me. So normally every single morning I just listen to a sermon, again, to start my morning and have a clear state of mind, right? But during this periods of my life where I really feel down and my self-esteem is shaky, I double down on that to continuously and consistently remind myself of who God says I am. So that is like the active part of me trying to get out of that state. Another thing that I do is I write out the truth on sticky notes and put them all around my workspace or in my bedroom. I kind of journal about this. I write it down in my gratitude journal every single night before I go to sleep, reminding myself and enforcing that identity, that super identity that I should not forget about. I should know that this is who I am, regardless of what is happening. That does not define me. What really defines me is who God says I am. That is perfect, that is smart, that has all things, basically, right? So that identity is what I always have to remind myself of consciously, by writing, by listening to sermons, messages, by studying. So again, I can be grounded in that truth. I can be grounded in my identity in Christ. Now, because the way life is, the way the world is, you can just simply go out and something just throws you off track. Watching the news is just gloom and doom every single day. Some of the podcasts that you think that, oh, this is something that is uplifting, at some point something horrible or just some bad episode is what you turn to listen to at some point. So life, there's ups and downs. That's just something that is standard with life, right? There's ups and downs. It just depends on how you approach it and how you let it affect you. So because of this, you have to constantly, consciously feed your mind the truth before the world and every other unfortunate circumstance actually tries to feed you a lie about yourself that you might tend to believe. Now, the next thing is identity-based habits. So once your mind is anchored, then you can rebuild or start rebuilding your daily routines, right? But I do not do this by just writing a punishing to-do list. No, I use identity-based habits. And if you have read the book, what's the name of the book? This common book, Atomic Habits. If you have read Atomic Habits, you are going to learn a lot about identity-based habits. That's where I learned that phrase from, identity-based habits. So in order for me to kind of rebuild my self-esteem, I focus on identity-based habits. Because you do not just want to do tasks, right? You call yourself who you are striving to be. So instead of saying I have to force myself to read 10 pages this night, or I have to force myself to read 10 pages this week, I tell myself I am someone who invests in her personal growth. And because I'm that person, naturally, I read a couple of pages every night before I go to bed. Now, that's regardless of whether it's fiction or a self-help book or an autobiography or an article or whatever, right? Reading is something that is good. It really helps keep your mind active. And it helps you learn something every single day. So basically, I'm going to say because I'm someone who invests in my personal growth, obviously I'm gonna read every single night. before I go to sleep. And it's going to help me go to sleep too. And instead of saying I need to drag myself to the gym 3 times a week, 4 times a week, every single day, whatever it is for you, I say I am a woman who loves working out and fueling her body with healthy foods. And because that is who I am, I definitely work out 3 to 4 times a week, right? Because that is the kind of person that I am. So when your habits are tied to a positive identity, you do not have to rely on fleeting motivation. You do not have to force it. You simply just act like the person that you are, the person that you want to be, but you like superimpose that identity and basically you become that person. I want to normalize this. Have you ever had a situation where a rejection simply derailed your day or your entire week or even your month? It's just like up and down simply because of a rejection or something that happened that just kind of derailed you entirely. How do you usually pull yourself out of that funk? What do you do? What are the steps that you take to get out of that situation? Please comment below because I promise you, you're not the only one. Now let's talk about rebuilding the self-trust and the actual reset. When you spend an entire week doing absolutely nothing, like I did when I got that rejection email, something deeper happens than just falling behind on work. You actually break trust with yourself. You told yourself you were going to do something and you did not. Now when that happens, your brain stops believing your own plans. And to get back on track, you cannot write a massive punishing to-do list just to catch up. What you have to do is slowly rebuild that self-trust. And to repair that trust, I start incredibly small. I give myself tasks that are almost impossible to fail at. I write them down and then I physically check them off. Now that simple act of checking off a task, it sends a signal to your brain that I am doing what I said I would do. It gives you an immense sense of accomplishment, which really just lights you up. At the end of the day, personally, I physically write down my wins, like during my gratitude journaling before bed. If I was able to complete this one task, that is something that I'm grateful for. So I journal about that. I write down this win, I was able to do this, and even kind of go a little bit deeper on how I felt in that process, how I felt after I did it, how I felt while doing it, right? So that journaling really helps remind you that you actually did do something, you were able to accomplish what you said you would. And this process is very, very important because it helps you intentionally focus on the wins, focus on what went well, and just entirely forget what did not go well. Because even in this whole reset process, things might still not go as you want, again, because life happens. So during this process, during this reset period, you want to focus on the wins, be grateful for that, and forget about what didn't go well. Do not focus on that, right? It might be something that you need to improve on or whatever. What you need to do in that situation is focus on the lessons that you learned during this failures or what didn't go well. What are the lessons that you learned? So turn that into a win and let go of what did not go well. The second thing you want to do is honoring your personal boundaries, because rebuilding self-belief requires a massive boundary shift. So we did talk a little bit more about boundaries in my boundaries video. I'm going to link it at the end of this video so you can watch that next. It really goes deeper into how to set boundaries. You want to make sure that you watch that after this. But when you're recovering from a setback, boundaries are basically your lifeline. So the first thing that I do is set boundaries with my inner critic. When that guilt starts creeping in, I literally have to tell myself to like, okay, stop, pause, forget about that, right? That is not what we are focusing on now. That is not important right now. We are focusing on the positive. Just rewire my brain basically to focus on what went well, on what is going well, and learn from the setbacks. So I simply just tell myself, okay, stop, we're moving forward, right? That's done, that happened, God is good, we are moving forward. And secondly, I enforce strict boundaries with my time. If I only have the emotional capacity to work for 1 hour, I am going to stop at 1 hour. Now, this is not something that happens all the time, but in that process of resetting, depending on how bad the setback was, you really have to like reset slowly. So if it takes maybe an hour for 2 days, or maybe even if it's just 1 day, if you're like, okay, this day I'm just going to do 1 hour, that 1 hour builds momentum. And the next day or the next couple of days, you're going to go back to how things were. So what I simply do is honor my body's recovery process, right? And the third thing is the clean slate reset. Now, this is one of the most important rules for overcoming a setback or overcoming a bad week. And that's simple. Focus on progress and not perfection. When I have a bad week, my instinct, and probably for most people, is really to carry all the unfinished tasks to the next Monday. But all that does is guarantee that you start your week feeling behind, feeling overwhelmed, and really feeling defeated. Even before you start any of the tasks, like the start of the week, you're already defeated because of all of the tasks that you have carried over to Monday. So what I do is I refuse to focus or to dwell on what I did not get to do, on the tasks that I did not get done. Instead, I do a hard reset. So basically, I wipe the slate clean. I acknowledge that last week was a wash. It's done. It's gone. Let's move forward. Let's start afresh. I forgive myself, and then I build a brand new plan based on where I am today. So you do not have to be perfect to be productive, right? Like, at all, because you cannot even be perfect. That's never going to happen because the world exists. You just have to be willing to reset and take it one step at a time. So know that a setback is just a season, right? It's not your identity. You are allowed to have days where you do absolutely nothing and just read fiction just to survive. However, when that weekend comes, you have to remind yourself of who you are, not of who someone thinks you are, and then rebuild that self-trust and reset. And if you're coming out of a heavy, unproductive week and you need a structured way to get back on track without feeling overwhelmed, my free 7-step weekly reset blueprint is exactly what you need. It walks you through how to wipe the slate clean and start afresh. The link is down in the description box below, or simply comment weekly reset and I'm going to send it to you. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please do not forget to hit the like button, subscribe to this channel, share with someone who needs a productivity boost. Make sure you watch the video on the screen next, which goes deeper into how to set boundaries for you to be more productive and more effective, basically towards you achieving your goals. Thanks again for watching, and I'm going to see you in the next one. Bye.